And how do you do that? How do you actively make a choice not to behave in a way that you're not proud of? And this isn't to say you need to be at your best or your 100% version of yourself every single day. That's not realistic. That leads to burnout. That's not, we all have bad days. But how, when you are having those bad days and in some of those more unproductive thought patterns, how can you still be a person that you are proud of and interact with people in a way that still makes you feel good? Okay, so positive psychology as a field overall is, the study of human flourishing. And there's been a lot of different models proposed over the years about, what are the different components of flourishing and how do we look at it? How do we measure it? And it all started with a man named Martin Seligman, who was operating out of the University of Pennsylvania. He is often considered the founding father of positive psychology. And he first proposed these pathways to happiness back in 2002 with his pathways to happiness as the pursuit of a pleasant life, the engaged life, and a meaningful life. So that kind of started the baseline of the current day model. And then he published a book called Flourish in 2013, where he added on achievement and relationships as key contributors to overall well-being. And that building on these things, these different petals, as now we call them, how you can leverage those to your advantage to increase your well-being, which also has to do with positivity, and yes, is a key contributor to happiness. It's not all it is. And then lastly, just in 2016, this last component was finalized. So vitality and our diets, our sleep patterns, our exercise and fitness levels, how having a healthy body impacts your overall well-being. So just wanted to provide this as a little bit of a baseline for anybody who might not be familiar with positive psychology or maybe psychology in general. A lot of what most of the work has been in psychology up until the past 10 or 15 years has been looking at what's wrong with people and how do we fix what's wrong with people. And positive psychology is really about, like I said earlier, just building on what's right there. And when we look at like regular psychology and the traditional field, you're kind of assuming people are living life at like a -5. If they have mental challenges, or if they're just having some emotional struggles in life, they're getting down at a -5, and psychology is how you bring them up to baseline and 0. Positive psychology is about bringing them what we call north of neutral. And how can you not just survive at a baseline level, getting through the days, but how do you really, maximize your human experience? Okay. So today we're going to be talking about building a better mindset and character strengths, which fall under the pillars of positivity and engagement. And when we're talking about positivity here, again, it's not just, wearing your rose-colored glasses and going about life in, ignorant bliss. It's really more about choosing to focus on the thoughts that are serving you, and that's going to help you get where you want to go in the long run, and then actively challenging the thoughts that don't get you there. And so because I love definitions, and sometimes I think they just do a better job at explaining, really what we're talking about here. Mindset is a set of beliefs or a way of thinking that determines your behavior, your outlook, and your mental attitude. So it's really the lens through which we see the world, and all of the things that we do, all of the reactions that we have are really grounded in what your mindset is. And it also determines, how we think about our present experience, how we think about the future. So you'll be familiar with terms, optimism, pessimism, and what we're going to be talking about in the next couple slides here is about fixed and growth mindset, which some of you may be familiar with, but maybe not. So another reason mindset is so important is because of this concept of self-fulfilling prophecies. And when it comes to making changes in our lives or taking on new opportunities or new responsibilities, it's that voice that, when you're presented with either a challenge or an opportunity, how are you thinking about that? How are you responding? And what it really believes, what this really is, if you think that you are going to fail at something or that you're not capable of doing something, your brain goes into this thought loop, a downward spiral of, making that come true. But the same thing is also true. The opposite is also true, rather. If you think that you can improve, if you think that you can solve a challenge, if you think that you can achieve something, it kicks in this behavior and it kicks in thought patterns that will help you accomplish that. So what does that look like in practice? Because I think that explaining that out loud doesn't always make as much sense as when you have a visual to go with it. So say you are a salesperson, and this can apply to, you're looking at yourself as a friend, you're looking at yourself as a mom, you're in another role. But just as a tactical example, I think everybody can kind of wrap their head around. If you are having trouble meeting your numbers as a salesperson, or you're having trouble meeting the deliverables on a project, or getting a group of people to collaborate together, if you have a more fixed mindset, a little bit more negative, you might have this internal thought that, says, I'm a bad salesperson, I'm a bad team member, I'm a bad leader, I'm a bad mom, etc. Having this belief and having your brain go immediately to this kind of thought is going to result in basically you giving up trying to improve. You're not going to think that, this is something I could do, I could improve on. You'll kind of just stop trying. And if you stop trying to improve, you're not going to see any improvement, which again, just reinforces that idea that, I'm a bad salesperson, I can't do this. And it just goes on and on again. On the flip side, if you're in more of a positive mindset, or what we call a growth mindset, thinking that, selling is a skill set, I am not just one or the other, I can build on things, you'll start to practice and you'll learn skills and you'll get better at it, and things start to look a little brighter and shinier. So over time, if you are practicing and learning new skills, you'll likely have more sales, with the time and practice and energy that you can put into that. Oh, skipped a bunch of slides there. Sorry, guys. So I said these terms a couple times about fixed and growth mindsets, and this is really like you're either one or the other in a certain situation. There's no like hybrid thing, but you can, you don't just have a fixed mindset, or you don't just have a growth mindset. It really depends on the situation you're in. And when you're in a fixed mindset, you're a little bit more on the judger path. You believe that your abilities are established, you can't change. There's really nothing you can do to control what's going on. And it's really about kind of making excuses for why things are the way they are and not looking at a solution-based strategy for improving them. Whereas a growth mindset is more about that learner path, believing that you can learn and grow if you invest enough time and effort, and really about improvement. So the goal here and what we want to get to is developing more of a growth mindset in certain situations, taking yourself out of the fixed place where you believe there's nothing you can do about things. And when you're in a fixed mindset, you look at a setback as, the end of the world, or, just a very negative event, and it really impacts you deeply. Whereas if you adopt more of that growth mindset, you look at these setbacks as opportunities for learning, and you can do something more productive with that thought rather than just sitting in, woe is me, things are terrible, I'm terrible. And again, that self-fulfilling prophecy that really doesn't help anyone, advance their career, build stronger relationships, whatever your goal might be, and seeing those outcomes is really dependent on having this growth mindset. Just another example, because it's actually relevant to what we're doing now. If you give a presentation and you feel like maybe that didn't go so well, that's just because I'm not a good public speaker. That's another example of just a really a fixed mindset. It's very close-ended thought. It doesn't really leave any room for improvement. And flipping over to this growth mindset, and you can apply this to any different situation you might find yourself feeling more fixed in, is just adding that word yet to the end. Is I'm not a good presenter yet. And just saying that to yourself and really changing those words does switch your brain into the growth mindset, where you understand that you could be someday a really great presenter if you do X, Y, Z to get there. If you practice skills, if you have a strategy for improvement, and if you believe that you actually can change and improve. So fixed and growth mindset, we also call the judger versus learner mental pathways, and I'll show you a visual of that in a minute. But I just wanted to show a couple examples of a few different ways that these things show up for people, and different situations and mind thoughts you might find yourself thinking of. So you can take a minute and just read over these and think about where you might fall in a certain situation. Maybe you've experienced a difficult time today. Maybe this week has been presenting you with some challenges. So really think about where your mental thoughts went when that happened. I do want to take a minute if anybody has any questions about this before we kind of get into what are actionable steps you can take to flip into the growth mode. Shruti, I don't know if I've missed anything in the chat here. I'll pull it up.
No, you're good. So, sorry, was that somebody? Yeah, we don't have any questions in the chat yet.
Great. That means I'm doing things correctly. It took me a while to wrap my head around some of this stuff when I was learning it. So, okay. So, if anybody was having any feelings of, man, sometimes I am kind of more on that judger path, not to worry. Mindsets are learned, and therefore we can change them. So there are some specific steps we can take. And I think this will be really helpful for everybody if you can really pinpoint a moment, like I said, this week or today even, where you've had that more initial judging reaction of, this is something that seemed very set to you. Paying attention to chiming in on your inner mindset chatter in these fixed moments is really the first step of getting out of it. Like, you need to be aware of when it's happening. And I think self-awareness for people is one of the most challenging things. And it's certainly been something I've focused on in past years about, trying to improve, and just knowing where you're coming from, where your thoughts are at, is really that first step here. So then next step is recognizing you have a choice about where your brain is going and what your thoughts are. Like, you do have control over your emotions, over your reactions. It takes some effort, and it actually takes talking back to it with a growth mindset. You literally have to tell your brain that you'd rather, think this way than another way. It's not just going to happen automatically until you can train yourself into getting into that thought pattern, which takes practice. Anything you want to get good at takes practice. And I think that this can feel silly to people sometimes. Is like, yes, you literally have to talk to yourself in your brain. You can talk out loud if that makes it helpful too. So once you've recognized that you have that choice, you are actively trying to talk to yourself about taking a better path. You then actually have to do whatever that action is that puts you on the growth path. It's not just thinking about it, you actually have to do it. Again, one of those things that is easier to talk about at a conceptual level than actually in practice. So wanted to give a few examples, and I'm not going to read through every line on this, but if you're approached with a situation that you think is a challenge, you might have those doubts about, are you sure you can do it? Maybe you're not talented enough to achieve that. And if that doubt comes into your mind, talk back to it. I'm not sure that I can do it, but I think I can learn. I think that I can practice something to help it get better. Then you might still have that feeling of, if you're a failure, it's not productive. And, most people who are successful and achieve things, have failures along the way. All the great athletes, they had to practice days and days and days, sometimes getting no days off for any of us here in Patriots Nation. You need to try, and trying is the key to success. If you don't try, you've already failed. So these are the types of things when, we're approached with new projects at work, or somebody is asking us to take on a new responsibility that we're a little nervous about. Maybe we don't have the established skill set to get through that. What can we do for ourselves to help us learn? And if we don't do it perfectly, how do we look at that? Maybe can't use the word failure, but how do we look at that as a growth opportunity and learning? This can also happen when you hit setbacks, like you've come across a roadblock in a project you're working on, or if you are facing criticism. Other people might call it feedback, which is not always a bad thing, but I think sometimes our immediate reaction to getting feedback is to, defend ourselves. But that defensive reaction is a result of a fixed mindset, and trying to pass that blame onto somebody else or not accepting that feedback doesn't help you fix it or grow and do better next time. So one of the things that we've been talking about, Shruti mentioned, I am going through the CAP program, the Certification for Applied Positive Psychology. We like to take the word feedback and talk about it more as feed forward. It's okay, great. How do I do better next time? And if you get good feedback, that's like, yep, you did great. Ask about more specific things. What was so great about it? How can I repeat this, process or result to, continue doing well? Or is there really something I can improve on? And really taking ownership of that growth yourself. Okay, so this is that judger versus learner path that I had mentioned a minute ago. And this little graphic was really based on this book, Change Your Questions, Change Your Life, by Dr. Mary Lee Adams. So if anybody is looking for some more tactical skills on how to kind of switch that mindset in real time and talking back to your brain, that's a great resource. There's a lot about the judger versus learner path and growth and fixed mindset. So starts with, you have something that comes up that's kind of negative and you can choose which path to go down. So say, your brain is geared more towards the judger path. So here we go. Who are we to blame? But you have to ask yourself these switching questions to stop yourself from going down into the judger pit. And a couple examples of that is just when you find yourself thinking, this isn't my fault. This is just bad. Why am I such a failure? You can ask yourself things like, how else can I think about this? Or what do I want to learn? Or is there another perspective I can take here? Can I look at this feedback as an opportunity for growth instead of a criticism and telling me that I'm doing something wrong? So that's kind of it on the growth and fixed mindset piece of this. And you can't really talk about mindset without talking about optimism and pessimism. I do just want to preface that I could dedicate a whole hour to talking about retraining your brain from being from pessimistic to optimistic. And I certainly have content on that if anybody's interested in a future session, but I just want to go over some basics right now because it is related, but to do this in under half an hour is not
Sydney, I
realistic.
just have one question here.
Yeah.
So, I recently read this book, which was Dare to Lead by Brené Brown,
Yes.
and she mentions about a square squad. So, it's like having the closest, maybe 3 or 4 people who you bounce back your ideas to, and it's just more like having an accountability partner. So, do you think is that also, I'm sure that, if you have an accountability partner and you can speak out your negative thoughts, and is that something which is possible here, or is it even
Yeah,
good to
definitely.
consider?
Absolutely. Having a person that you trust to, share thoughts with is definitely a good strategy. If you have somebody you can trust to help guide you back to the right path, the more moral path, the more growth path, leverage them. Use your network. Relationships are so important when it comes to well-being overall, especially when they are supportive. So if it's a friend, if it's a colleague, if you have somebody that can, reliably not sink you further into whatever thought pattern you're already going through, definitely lean on them. I was actually just talking about this in a meeting earlier about, needing to have a space. And yes, it's good to vent, or, that's actually a great example of when you're coming across a situation that you don't feel super great about. It's like, yes, you can vent it out, acknowledge that you're having that negative reaction or that negative feeling towards a person or the event. And then once you've acknowledged it and recognized it, get out of it. And if you have somebody in your network that can help you do that and says, yeah, that's true, but could you think about it like this? Is a tactic I've taken with a lot of my friends, when sometimes things aren't going their way, but they seem very stuck in that negativity, and we call it a negativity bias. It's helpful to have people in your network that can do that for you. And if you don't know who they are, or you don't have one, maybe it's time to meet some new people. Or if you don't think that one of your friends is capable of doing that, ask that of them. hey, I'm having this really hard time with the situation. Can you help talk me through this and help me find a different perspective that can get me out of this rut? Misery loves company,
True.
and we can certainly drag each other down.
Perfect. There's another question in the chat by Laura. She's saying, how does this tie into imposter syndrome?
Yeah. So I'm not actually familiar with the technical, definition of imposter syndrome, and I could definitely like look into that further. But my initial reaction is this is not about putting on a front, but there is a certain level of a fake it till you make it kind of thing. You can decide to put forth an opinion or a version of yourself that you like better, even though you may not completely feel it internally. You might not, be super bought into the idea, but you know that you should feel or act a certain way. Um, it does take a while to get to that internal adoption of this, having that felt sense of connection to what you are trying to do. Or I'm not sure if that really answers your question, but knowing that you do have a choice about how you are presenting yourself and making an active decision to present a version that you like and being a version that you like takes time and effort. So it's definitely a learned skill.
Great.
Can I ask one question? So
Yes, please.
the two mindsets that you talk about, right? It could also be situation dependent. And sometimes the judgment, right? Like judging is like the right response. And certain times learning is the right response, right? If you're at a higher leadership level, your peers are trying to change your course of path. But I think the defining when you will need to be learning and when you be judging is the first question. Does it make sense?
It does. Yeah. And I think you're right there. It's absolutely situational. And there are actually certain professions where being more on a judger path is actually beneficial for you. It's the minority, but things that have to do with the details and having an impact on people's life outcomes afterwards. So they talk about lawyers as a really great example of people who actually do better when they are on a judger path and have a more fixed mindset. There was one other example I can't remember off the top of my head, but yeah, honestly, even in a leadership role, I think, it's best to at least consider what other people are saying. And that's more about, creating a collaborative culture and fostering engaged employees, is you don't have to let them derail you, but certainly hearing their opinion and not thinking that there is no other way than your own is going to get you further. So I don't know how easy this is to see on other people's screen, but the learner path is about win-win situations. And obviously if you're in a leadership role, like you have more responsibility tied to the decisions you're making, and it has a larger impact than maybe just an individual contributor. But being solution focused always is the best choice there, and not just perpetuating this thought pattern of putting blame on someone else. So being accountable a little bit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, it helps. It just like didn't think about this too, means actively don't think about these choices, but you're making it somehow. And I feel like first part is to sometimes it's like there are certain competition, certain things happening, between your two employees, even, not even you are involved, and how do you convey them to which pathway to go to, right? So I was also thinking in that aspect. So this is helpful. Thank you very much.
Yeah, you're welcome. And I think that's when those questions about like, how else can you look at this comes in, like, what can you learn from this? And there's another area of psychology that talks about, especially in situations with more than one people, and I'm forgetting the real term for it right now, but it talks about being a victim, a perpetrator, and what is the third one on that triangle? And a persecutor. And they talk about how you can flip that into a more productive mindset by becoming a coach or a creator. And again, I'm missing the third one. But Especially in organizations, there are so many different applications of how, as a leader, you can encourage employees to take this path. You know, and in manager roles, sometimes it's hard to say, you know, yes, you're right in thinking that negative way. I understand that too. Like, I am also seeing that behavior, and really trying to remove yourself from that situation and guiding them down the right path. That's where being that safe space for someone comes in. Like, yes, you can hear it. You don't need to, you know, tell them they're wrong at all, but quickly getting them out of that and trying to have a more productive mindset about how you can turn that into a solution is going to be key for anybody in a manager position.
Excuse me, I have a question. Hello?
Yes, go ahead, Elaine.
Okay, awesome. I just want to go a little bit more into depth what you meant by the framework and the module of a perpetrator and a victim, because I don't really understand the broad sense of that.
Yeah, so again, I have not brushed up on the details about this in a minute, but that triangle framework is about when you are involved in conflicts and challenges, and there tends to be 3 different roles that people take. And if you're having a challenge or a conflict among just 2 people, sometimes you'll see one of those roles drop off. But when you come into a problem, right, there's always somebody who is seen as the instigator, the perpetrator, somebody who is causing the issue. And the other person or the other 2 people in that conflict might see themselves as a victim of whatever that person is doing. Or they might look at themselves as the person who should be punishing or retaliating against that person for causing the issue in the first place. So the concept that I was just speaking about is, how do we change that to look at somebody who is presenting us with a conflict or a challenge, instead of seeing them as a a perpetrator who is causing an issue? How do we look at them as a creator? How do we look at them as somebody who is creating an opportunity for us to grow, rather than somebody who is trying to bring us down or tell us we're doing something wrong? And that can kind of be flipped into a coach too, as somebody who previously we would think about as trying to punish the person who is bringing us that opportunity. How can they coach us into taking that as an opportunity? How do you coach and grow other people from that opportunity rather than a conflict?
I think that makes total sense. Thank you for the clarification.
Yeah, absolutely. Any other questions I could answer about the judger versus learner path, or other things I kind of just threw out the wall there? All right.
I think we're good.
So quickly talking about optimism and pessimism here. Again, with the mindset being, you know, the lens through which we see the world, being geared towards the positive or the negative is really important. And the beliefs that we have about optimism and pessimism really perpetuate that growth and fixed mindset we were just talking about. Again, with my favorite definitions here, optimism is having a hopefulness about the future that is wedded to reality. So optimism is not thinking everything's going to go right all the time. It's not an ignorant feeling that you're having. It is tied to actual events, and it's an overall belief that things can change for the better. Not about burying our heads in the sand. It's having that basis in reality about, these are the way things are. I believe that they can change through either actions I take or, you know, organizational change that might be going on. And a lot of people talk about optimism and pessimism as if they're character traits, but they're not. You are not an optimist or a pessimist. Optimism is more about how we think and not about how we are as a person. So you may have optimistic thought patterns and tendencies, but it's not a fixed definition for your state of being. Just some science that they've tested and come to see the benefits of having this optimistic thinking style. Optimists tend to experience less stress when dealing with difficulties. So this ties into resilience for anybody who is familiar with that. And Trudy, you had mentioned Brene Brown. She talks about resilience a lot. Optimists also adapt better when negative events occur. They're less likely to give up on tasks. They learn lessons from the negative decisions they've made. So this is, what do you do with the consequences of your actions? Are you going to sit there and blame yourself, or are you going to learn from them? And also a health factor, people who are optimistic or have optimistic thinking styles are actually at lower risk for heart disease. Whereas these pessimistic thinking patterns actually correlate with underperformance and depression. So if you're experiencing any members of your team who may, not be living up to standards or might be just having a hard time getting some things done, might be a good opportunity to think about how they are thinking about things. Talk to them how they're thinking about things. So just another way to think about this is how do you explain what's happening to you? And this is how you can kind of see where your thought patterns are falling. Are you an optimistic thinker or a pessimistic thinker? And what this looks like for pessimistic thinking styles is when something good happens, they tend to say not always or not everything. So if you are a pessimistic thinker, it's, oh, I got a raise at work today. Well, I'm not always, on top of things. I'm not always going to get a raise. Like when the opportunity is there, I might not always get a positive review. It's fine that this time it happened, but it's not always going to be like that. Whereas when they experience a negative event, that turns into always and everything. Oh, my boss gave me some negative feedback. Like I always fail at these tasks that they give me. Everything is always hard for when I try to do it. And the optimistic thinking style is the opposite. So when positive events are happening to you, you tend to frame them as an always or an everything, and negative is a not always or not everything. So just another way that this looks when people experience positive events, negative, optimistic, pessimistic thinkers tend to think very temporarily about positive events. So it's my lucky day. This is a one-off. I try hard. My rival got tired if I won. Whereas if you're an optimistic thinker, you'll say, I'm always lucky. Like I'm very talented at what I do. And, in situations where you're in competition, it's, my rival's no good. Like you are owning your own success with this. And the opposite for negative events, pessimistic thinkers are going to say, I'm all washed up versus I'm exhausted. If you're stressed out or having a hard time seeing the results that you want, this is kind of how that thinks. Negative events tend to lead pessimistic thinkers to think more permanently. Diets never work versus the optimistic temporary thinkers, which diets don't work when you eat out all the time or when you don't go to the gym. And a couple other examples you can see there. So again, there are ways to train your brain out of this pessimistic thinking trap by talking to your mind chatter, just like I had showed with those different conversations in the growth versus fixed mindset. But there are different strategies depending on what kind of thought you're having, and it could really be a whole hour on its own, but just a little teaser there. They spend a lot of time talking about that in cognitive behavioral therapy, if anybody's familiar with that strategy. So light intro into optimism and pessimism there, but certainly an important topic to touch on when we're looking at mindset. Any questions on the mindset things before we kind of switch gears into character strengths? I know we're just kind of talking about a lot of areas where we might need to make some improvements in life, but I do want to spend some time kind of empowering you guys to understand what you're doing correctly and where your strengths are. Okay. Character strengths. We all have them. There are a few different models, and we're going to go through one of them, but I know some of you may be familiar with Gallup and their Strengths Finder tests. There is another survey and measure called the VIA survey, Values in Action. And that's the one we're going to be talking about today. So there's a couple things to note about character strengths is when you use them and you're involved in tech activities that require you to draw on your inner strengths, they actually get stronger. So you're building them as you use them. And we're also likely to feel more engaged in those tasks when we're able to use our strengths and demonstrate something that we have, a strength in. I could say the same word 5 times. Important to note too is that strengths are different than talents and skills, and there are different, got little definitions for each of those here, but when we're talking about character strengths, we are talking about the natural abilities that you already possess innately that you can call up and use as you please in any situation. Versus skills, which are things that you build on, they're things that you learn, and talents are kind of those more automatic things, people who are just whizzes on the piano from age 3, more of a talent where strengths are a little bit more, yeah, they're innate, you're born with them. They're just there. You can certainly build on them. And when we go into this assessment that we're going to do, these are the strengths that we are measuring on. Just another thing I've found really impactful when thinking about strengths is that we do have all 24 of these to some capacity. There will be, and you'll find out which ones of yours kind of are more strong and stick out and are easier for you to call up on. But we are all human, and these are 24 of the universally accepted strengths that have been agreed upon across countries, across cultures. And there definitely is a cultural impact on which strengths are going to show up further. For example, this course I'm in is a multinational community. It's actually an international course. We have people from Singapore, we have people from India, we have people from Asian cultures. And a lot of the topics of discussion we've had is around how certain values and strengths are deprioritized in other world cultures. So if you're involved in diverse teams and trying to work best within people's strengths, just recognize that if you are working with other individuals who come from a different background as you, they may place different value on different strengths. So we're going to get into an activity, and I wish I could figure out how to share volume here. Oops. Because I would play music or something, but I do want to take about 10 minutes or so and give you guys an opportunity to take this really quick assessment to find out what your own strengths are. I can find the chat. Here's the link. And I'm going to pull it up alongside you so I can make sure this actually works. But these are a series of questions, and you just are going to rate them on a scale of like, yes, this is me, no, it's not, to determine where your 24 character strengths kind of fall in rank order. And if there's time, I'd love to hear about whether you guys are surprised by your results. If you're comfortable dropping your top 5 strengths in the chat, that would be really great. But I do want to encourage you to answer these questions with your first gut reaction. If you take more than 10, 20 seconds to think about it, I tend to find that it skews the results a little bit. I actually had to take this test twice because I did not agree with my first round of results. So I dropped the link in the chat. Does anybody have any questions about this? It will ask you to put in your first name and your email, but this is not anything I'm storing. It's just so you can email yourself the results as well.
Sydney, it's Elaine again. Can you just share quickly the 25 universal characteristics?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Can you send this to us, or like, because we'll have to reflect on it?
Oh, sure. So the quiz, I think Shruti is going to send out the PowerPoint deck after this, but the assessment that's going to go on will actually guide you through them. There'll be specific questions they'll ask, and it will tell you the 24 at the end. But I will read them out loud as you guys are kind of getting locked in. The 24 they're going to rank for you are wisdom and knowledge, courage, humanity, justice, temperance, transcendence, appreciation of beauty, honesty, bravery, creativity, curiosity, fairness, forgiveness, gratitude, hope, humor, perspective, love of learning, love in general, leadership, kindness, judgment, humility, persistence, prudence, spirituality, self-regulation, social intelligence, teamwork, and zest. Oops. I will leave that up in case where'd it go? I will leave this up in case anybody wants to refer back to it. But they're going to ask you questions to rate yourself on, I think, situations is how this one is set up. So I sometimes find that actually not having this list in front of you will lead you to answer a little bit more truthfully if you're not thinking about, okay, how is this going to impact my results of the 24 on the other end? Is anybody having access issues or need further clarification on this little activity? Perfect. Let me see if I can figure out how to pull up some Zen music, and I'm going to set a little timer for about 8 to 10 minutes. If anybody wants to just say done in the chat when they're done, I can shorten that time if needed or extend it if needed. Not sure if that volume's going through, but I tried.
Yeah, it's good.
All right. For anybody who just joined the room, we are taking an interactive assessment. The link is in the chat.
Is it the first link or the second link?
It is the second link that says sid417pro.via survey. I'll drop it in here again just so it's the most recent comment. And this is going to be helping you assess your character strengths. Give it about 5 more minutes. Thanks, Christina. If anybody else finishes up, feel free to drop done in the chat, or like I said, if you're comfortable sharing your top 5, feel free. Yeah, Susan, I'd love to hear more about that. Thanks, Leslie. Thanks, Marta. Great, Stephanie. And as I mentioned, you will be able to see your results on the screen now, but they will email you your full profile. Thanks, Paige. That profile will have some more details on the character strengths too, and how they show up for you. Bill, great. Thanks, Ashton. Seeing a lot of honesty and humor from these results so far. Leslie, not surprised. Appreciation of beauty showing up here a couple times too. Courage.
Lots of like-minded people here.
Oh, that seems like it. This is great.
I wasn't able to get my phone to cooperate. Sorry.
Oh, that's okay. Hopefully, if you can either copy the link or maybe Shruti, if we can send that out again too for anybody who didn't have an opportunity to participate with our follow-up email. You could take it either after work today or when you have time this weekend.
That would be
Yeah,
great.
I'll send out the presentation and the link.
Great. Yeah, I can send over the PowerPoint to you as well too. I don't think I did that before. But... Okay. I know there might be a few people still finishing up the survey, no problem. I want to definitely give you an opportunity to do that. I was going to, if we had time, try to create one of those, word blurbs with everybody's strengths, but I want to be mindful of any meetings anybody has to run to and the rest of your time today. So I'll just share mine really quick because you guys were all so so kind to share yours in the chat. Perspective, zest, honesty, hope, and curiosity were mine. And as I had mentioned before you guys started taking this, this was my second time taking the quiz because I didn't think that my first results were accurate. They didn't resonate with me. I felt a little bit of that imposter syndrome Laura had asked about earlier. It's like, that's not me. So I took it a little bit more quickly the second time around and was more in tune with the results. Does anybody want to share any thoughts about the quiz or the experience, and maybe some of you that were surprised, why you were surprised or what was surprising?
So when you say it has like a 3 categories, right? Like a known strength, mid strength, and less known strength. Those less known strengths are like just the weakness, or there is some part of it left?
No, they're not weaknesses necessarily. They're just not as strong as your other strengths. And you can, if you are displeased with the ones you see in your bottom 5 there, you can actually practice building them. So these strengths do have a tendency to change around order as we go through life, as we learn new things, as we intentionally practice. So for example, if zest was in your bottom 5, zest has to do with, excitability about the world and bringing, enthusiasm to everything you do. So maybe you try and think about yourself in situations about how can I, be more enthusiastic about this conversation, or how can I, try and inspire a friend today. And trying to incorporate intentional activities that can help you build on those strengths will actually strengthen them over time. Practicing using them over time too is good, and identifying them when you do see certain things. Again, just that self-awareness piece really helping you grow.
I also was kind of surprised. So one of my lesser strengths, I'm just gonna guide myself back to this, was actually, so my top 5 were just like humor, creativity, love of learning, gratitude, and fairness. And then social intelligence, which is probably my number 1 tool, or like my number 1 resource, and like talent. It was actually number 8. I was really kind of taken aback by that.
Yeah, I think a lot of things, I don't know about the algorithm that goes on in the background here, but it's very common to, see those things in the top 10 and maybe be surprised at their order, because I know this test doesn't do a great job at telling you like a stack rank about what your score was on each, but they do measure them in the background. And I think that if you buy the more complete report, it's a little pricey, but if you are interested in having that more in-depth look at it, you can certainly do so. And I think it would give you your exact numbers. So it might be number 8 for you, Elaine, but it might not be so far off from number 5. And maybe that's an opportunity to be surprised by some of the strengths you didn't know were so strong.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. All right. Perfect. Thank you, guys. Some
Yeah,
people
I
have to
know
drop
we
off
are
here.
on the top of the hour. This was a fantastic session, Sydney, and I really loved the last exercise which we did. It was so fantastic. And though my results are fairly what I thought it would be, but it's good to get an endorsement every time. So this is great. Thank you all for being with us today. And I would, as I mentioned, so I'll send you this presentation and the link again with the follow-up email. So Sydney, thank you so much. Thank you for your time. And I'm sure everybody else enjoyed the session as much as I did. It was fantastic to have you here.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Shruti, and for everybody taking some time out of your day. Really appreciate it.
Okay, bye-bye, and a very good afternoon, and happy rest of the day to you all.
Yes, thank you.